par l'IDDRI dans le cadre du projet Strong Ices. Je m'appelle Julien Rochette, je suis directeur du programme Océan à l'IDDRI et j'aurai le plaisir d'animer cette session qui sera dédiée à la gestion des ressources marines et particulièrement les ressources de pêche en Afrique de l'Ouest. Avant de rentrer dans le vif du sujet, je vous rappelle que ce webinaire bénéficie d'une traduction simultanée français-anglais et que vous pouvez donc choisir la langue de votre choix en utilisant l'onglet interprétation en bas à droite de votre écran. Alors, vous savez certainement qu'en Afrique de l'Ouest s'exercent de nombreuses activités de pêche, à la fois artisanales et industrielles, et que beaucoup d'experts alertent de plus en plus sur la surexploitation de certains stocks. Et dans ce contexte, il y a évidemment plusieurs outils que peuvent utiliser les gouvernements, les organisations intergouvernementales et les différents acteurs. Et parmi eux, il y a un meilleur suivi, contrôle et surveillance des activités humaines pour à la fois assurer le respect de la réglementation en vigueur et par ailleurs pour lutter contre les activités illégales. Et c'est précisément ces enjeux de surveillance que nous allons aborder au cours de cette prochaine heure et demie. Avec 4 intervenants que je souhaiterais ici remercier. Dia Belhabib, tout d'abord, chargée de recherche à l'ONG EcoTrust Canada. Bonjour Dia. Sandy Davis, expert technique à l'ONG Stop Illegal Fishing. Godfrey Bayou-Tsibou, coordinateur du Centre régional de suivi, contrôle et surveillance, qui est une instance placée au sein du comité des pêches du centre ouest du golfe de Guinée. Et enfin, ma collègue Claudia Kremers, chercheur à l'IDDRI. Alors, vous aurez évidemment l'occasion d'échanger avec ces experts à travers la boîte de dialogue Q&A que vous pouvez voir aussi en bas de votre écran. Sachez que les 20 intervenants parleront en anglais, que j'essaierai moi-même de faire un mix entre le français et l'anglais, mais en tous les cas, vous-même, n'hésitez pas à poser vos questions dès maintenant dans la langue de votre choix. Voilà, vous savez tout. Je voudrais sans plus attendre passer la parole à Dia Belhabib pour un premier tour d'horizon des différents enjeux liés à la gestion des pêches en Afrique de l'Ouest. Dia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen. It's going to take a second. Choose the wrong window. Here it is. So before beginning, I would like to acknowledge the territories that I live, work, and play on, which are the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories here in Vancouver, otherwise known as Vancouver. Thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it. The opportunity to talk about West African fisheries is always deep to my heart. I call this region of the world a second home, basically. One thing that we have to say about West African fisheries, we often see numbers, statistics, but the thing is that statistics in the region are not necessarily quite accurate. An image, if I have to paint an image of fisheries, one thing that comes to mind is that fish is important for so many reasons in the region. First of all, it feeds thousands of people. We're talking about 2 million people in this region of the world that are employed by the fishing sector. It's a matter of livelihoods, it's a matter of income as well. This income has been dwindling, it's been decreasing because of the impacts of illegal fishing, overexploitation, pollution, climate change, and so on and so forth. Fish is also food, but it is not the only thing. Fisheries bringing a sense of identity and culture, but also stewardship. People feel a strong connection to the ocean in this region, so much so that they feel a sense of ownership. When it comes to fishing dynamics, we are talking about 2 main sectors, which is the artisanal sector and the industrial sector. But here is when the twist or the plot twist happens. 1% of all fishing effort is industrial. The remainder is artisanal. And 75% of the catch is industrial. So the 1% takes away most of the catches in the region. And we're talking about a few hundred vessels, almost 1,000 vessels basically, that are authorized to fish in the region that are out competing dozens of thousands of pirogues. The number of pirogues is estimated to be nearing 80,000 in the 7 countries that we are of the sub-region of West Africa. And this number reaches easily 100,000 pirogues and canoes, whether small or big, throughout the region from Morocco to going south towards Angola. the 1,000 industrial vessels, or nearly 1,000 industrial vessels, this number is based on research on the lists that the governments have communicated, but we do believe that there are more vessels because not all licenses are actually documented. Nearly 200 vessels have multiple licenses across the region, which means that you can find a vessel fishing in Morocco. The same vessel will have a license to fish, for example, in Senegal, in Mauritania, etc., following, for example, Sardinella. 200 vessels have been domesticated, which means that it's practically impossible to follow through and understand who the real owner is or the beneficial owner is. And they're usually masking their presence by adopting a domestic ownership and domestic flag. A third of the entirety of the vessels that are licensed to fish in the region have committed a crime or illegal fishing at least once in their lifetime in the region. And on average, a third of licensed vessels have committed offenses twice. So they are what we call repeat offenders. And this dynamic really reflects how, for example, adjacency to the region's waters enables illegal fishing because of MCS or monitoring, control, and surveillance challenges. So talking about illegal fishing, we do know that globally illegal fishing generates a massive economic loss. In the sub-region of West Africa alone, we've estimated in 2017 that the losses were at around 2.3 billion US dollars, and this number has been increasing since then for major reasons, notably the Ebola crisis, because this number was estimated right at the edge of the Ebola crisis. Today, the pandemic is affecting heavily the ability of authorities to target or to focus on illegal fishing on the water. The region of West Africa generates, in fact, 40% of the global illegal fishing trade. This is how much it's been estimated in 2010. Over 60% of fish imported by the EU from that region has been estimated to come from an illegal fishing source. And in general, when we're talking about MCS, less than 0.1% is ever recovered through monitoring, control, and surveillance. We can talk here about the efforts that countries have been put forth, and these efforts have been increasing in the recent years, whether we're talking about technology, whether we're talking about the Port State Measures Agreement, or whether we're talking about the sanctioning practices. We're seeing the trend in Senegal, where the fines have drastically increased, the amount of the fines in Sierra Leone as well. In Guinea, transparency also has increased. In Guinea, for example, you can have access to all the licenses and all the sanctioned vessels on their website quite easily. In terms of impact, and going back to the artisanal sector, we hear a lot of fishermen over the years say, I go further and further to catch less and less fish. We've done an analysis also in 2017, and we could actually see this. You see that line that is declining over there where it says artisanal. That is the catch per unit of effort. So how much an artisanal boat is catching a year has been declining, and you can see the contrast with the industrial sector as well. We also see the increase in the fishing effort, meaning that fishermen tend to spend more time at sea and they tend to go further. And here is the deal. When that happens, it means that the territories or the waters where they're fishing overlaps quite heavily with where the industrial sector is operating as well. We're talking about two directions here. The industrial vessels tend to go towards inshore waters where the artisanal sector is operating. Whether those inshore waters are legal or illegal, accessed illegally is another story. This means that there are conflicts not only in terms of the species that are catching the artisanal sector, but also in terms of deaths at sea. We have counted over 250 deaths at sea in collisions alone in 7 countries of West Africa. The rest of the numbers are not available for other countries. This generates, obviously, distrust in the local governance systems. The management of fisheries cannot follow through simply because the information on the amount of fish that is taken from the water is not available through illegal practices is not available. And it drives us back, really, it sets us back to 20 years ago in terms of management's efforts. So I would say ultimately here, and this is quite gloomy, that no matter what the management's efforts are, if we cannot deal with illegal fishing, it's not something that's going to be having quite a positive outcome. And when we're talking about illegal fishing, it doesn't end at the fact of illegal fishing or taking fish away without an authorization from the water. We're talking about using illegal gear. We're talking about all forms of fishing-related offenses, but we're talking, or fishing within prohibited areas, but we are talking also about other crimes, non-administrative crimes. So it's going to be, for example, human rights and labor abuses that have been associated quite heavily with illegal fishing. You can see the flow there, how the industrial sector goes towards operates illegally through illegal transshipments in the region, and how that's linked to human rights and labor abuse, and how that's linked to illegal fishing and fraud and diversion strategies, etc., etc. So addressing illegal fishing in the region is quite complex, and it doesn't come with, it's not an easy challenge, basically. In terms of surveillance, when we talk about West Africa, we tend to really paint a gloomy and doomy picture about what's going on in the region. Yes, illegal fishing has been increasing. Yes, overexploitation has not been addressed yet, and it's going to take time. But we have seen quite an improvement in terms of how authorities and how fishermen actually address these issues. The technologies that are used right now are basically vessel monitoring systems on board vessels. We're talking about AIS as well, even though AIS is not necessarily mandated throughout the region. But authorities tend to use it more and more as a tool to understand the behavior of fishing vessels and other vessels, and detect whether or not those vessels have been associated with illegal fishing. We see the use of sea vision, of skylight, AI platforms that allow the understanding of the behavior, the criminal behaviors of fishing vessels. We also see an increase in the number of observers at sea. We're not only talking about tuna fisheries, we see more observers today in Sierra Leone and in Liberia as well. Same thing with Senegal. In terms of port state measures agreement, more and more countries are engaging in port state measures agreement. The capacity isn't there yet to cover all the vessels. Obviously, it's going to be a challenge for the next few years. However, there is this will to engage. I'm sorry, I think I've been cut off.
Yeah, everybody has been. So, but please continue. I think you was at your conclusion about the improvement of the monitoring.
Could you please enable screen sharing?
Karine, can you do that?
Yes, it's done.
Thank you. Going back right at it. When technology betrays us, we're still here.
Karine, can you assign me as an interpreter? I don't have that box of message here.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Let me know when it's ready. Am I good to go?
Yes.
Awesome. So I was talking about how when talking to authorities and when we're talking about surveillance, the message often comes out as, you know, the vessels licensed, when we monitor the licensed vessels, etc., etc. There is a massive gap there. There is little to no coverage of vessels that are not actually licensed in the region. This means that the ability to monitor thousands of vessels that are operating nearby or that are operating within the region, vessels that practice common incursions into the EEZs of these waters or these countries are hardly covered. The reason behind that is that AIS is not necessarily mandated, but also because of the lack of capacity to go out to that, you know, let's say 100 nautical miles out or 200 nautical miles out. It's very difficult to get there. And the financial resources are quite limited to do that. And we're not only talking about West Africa here, it covers also in Canada, we have similar issues. We're talking about other countries as well in the world where that kind of capacity isn't there yet. However, I have to say again that monitoring is improving overall. I have to finish with the gloomy aspects of illegal fishing, despite talking about the positiveness of how monitoring is improving. If we cannot address the issues related to overexploitation and illegal fishing, remember the beginning of the presentation. Fishing is not only about livelihoods of food and food, it's also an income. It's also about a sense of cohesion within the communities, a sense of identity, a sense of culture, and also a sense of belonging. The fact is that without sustainability of fish stocks and without proper conservation and management tools and monitoring tools against illegal fishing, we are seeing increasing threats towards maritime safety. We have seen increased piracy and armed robberies at sea in the Gulf of Guinea, and that is what I call a symptom. It is not necessarily an issue on its own, but it is a symptom of this form of resource exploitation or abusive resource exploitation. We are looking into issues such as environmental defender retaliation, which obviously gets, if we look into how Somalia has evolved over the years, it becomes piracy as well, and armed robbery at sea. And also food security issues. Poverty has been increasing. The income of fishermen has been declining over the years. And this is also research that we have done in 2019. Overall, we see a decline in the social and economic well-being of coastal communities, and that is reflective also of their ability to trust their local governance systems and their local governments. And it goes back towards the ability of being compliant, because if you don't trust your government, you're not going to be compliant with the rules and the regulations of said government. Thank you very much. Please get in touch. You can find me on Twitter. I tweet a lot about fisheries, but also you can just send me an email. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dia. Et excusez-nous pour ce petit problème technique au milieu. Merci beaucoup, Dia, pour ce panorama assez éclairant. Vous avez alterné des éléments assez positifs en disant notamment que le suivi s'améliorait, le contrôle et la surveillance s'amélioraient, mais aussi un certain nombre de points noirs avec, je retiens notamment que 40% de la pêche illégale est située en Afrique de l'Ouest, et je retiens également tous les drames humains et les violations des droits de l'homme dont vous nous avez parlé. Merci beaucoup en tout cas, on reviendra sur tout cela un peu plus tard. Je voudrais maintenant passer la parole à ma collègue Claudia Kremers, qui a aussi travaillé sur cette question du suivi, contrôle et surveillance en Afrique de l'Ouest. Claudia.
Thank you very much, Ian. I will share my screen. Voilà. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us during this webinar today. My name is Claudia Kremers. I'm a research fellow in international ocean governance at IDDRI. And today I'm going to talk to you about a report that we've recently written in the context of the Strong High Seas project called Options for Strengthening Monitoring, Control and Surveillance of Human Activities in the Southeast Atlantic region. In the context of our project, we work in 2 regions in the Southeast Pacific, where we already wrote a report, and now we've focused on the Southeast Atlantic. So we've organized an expert workshop online with different experts in the Southeast Atlantic region. And this workshop took place in May this year. And just to specify, the Southeast Atlantic is a very big region, as you can see on the map. It covers 22 countries, and it's the eastern side of the South Atlantic Ocean between Mauritania and South Africa. So what is MCS and why is it important? What is monitoring, control, and surveillance? So what you can see here on the slide is the definition that the Food and Agriculture Organization has been using since 1981. And what I think is important to specify or to clarify as well is that monitoring, control, and surveillance is often seen and has been developed in the fisheries context. But we like to take a broader approach and see MCS as a compass and as a tool that encompasses a wide range of tools, technologies, and policies that aim to promote compliance and ensure the conservation and sustainable use of marine resources. So this means that MCS can also be used beyond the fisheries context, such as for the monitoring, control, and surveillance of other human activities, and especially transnational illegal activities, such as human trafficking and forced labor. And I think Dia has given a good overview of how fisheries, illegal fishing crime, and other crimes are connected as well. So states in the region use a great variety of MCS tools that range from logbooks and patrol vessels to satellite technology and observer programs. So here you can see an overview of all kinds of MCS tools that exist. And now just to give a few hints on what the challenges are that we've seen in our research on MCS in the Southeast Atlantic. So we've based this report on both the workshop that we've organized and also on literature reviews and interviews with experts. And from this research, we can identify several challenges that all states in the Southeast Atlantic experience in one way or another. So one of the challenges is cross-sectoral cooperation and coordination, or I would say the lack thereof. I actually thought this process of this research was very hopeful because I saw there were a lot of initiatives to improve cross-sectoral cooperation and coordination, but so far it is not sufficient. And why is this important? Because cooperation and coordination at a cross-sectoral level could strengthen MCS because it gives opportunities to share knowledge, to share data, capacity, and best practices. Another challenge in the region is the capacity and the political will. So this is what we often say also about areas beyond national jurisdiction. Often states, and especially in the region, they don't have enough capacity or enough tools, enough technology or political will to really make sure that they monitor what is going on in their waters or beyond in the high seas. Also, there's the challenge of poor governance. So national institutions that are responsible for sanctions are sometimes weak, and that can result to and facilitates IUU fishing. Another question which I thought was interesting is that in the region, there's a lot of unresolved claims of jurisdiction, which would make it challenging to conduct joint actions or joint surveillance activities around disputed borders. Another challenge which we see also in other regions is on data collection and sharing. There are many different ministries or government departments that are working on data collection, but they don't really communicate enough together, or sometimes there's not even a national MCS policy in place. What Dia has also mentioned is that global pandemics have also an impact on MCS in the region. So we've seen that with Ebola, but also with COVID. It has an impact and it affects onboard observer programs and import and at-sea inspections. And lastly, because our research often focuses on areas beyond national jurisdiction, we can see that in the Southeast Atlantic, there's a lack of awareness and understanding of impacts of illegal human activities taking place in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Areas beyond national jurisdiction are not a priority often for Southeast Atlantic states, but it's important to keep in mind the connectivity between what's happening in areas beyond national jurisdiction can also impact exclusive economic zones. So I wanted to provide you also a quick overview, a visual overview of all the types of actors that are active in the Southeast Atlantic region and that are in one way or another contributing to strengthening MCS in the region. And I thought this was particularly striking because there were many more actors working on MCS than in the Southeast Pacific. So the Southeast Pacific is the Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru region. So I thought this was really interesting that there are many initiatives at different levels, from RFMO levels, from civil society, state levels, and intergovernmental organizations. So just to also mention, it's not a topic that is not being addressed. It's actually a topic that is addressed by a lot of actors. And the question is, how can we scale this up or learn from each other in the region? So how to strengthen MCS in the Southeast Atlantic? So in our report, we have identified 5 different pathways through which we can strengthen MCS in the Southeast Atlantic. So the first one is on the collection and sharing of data. One of the ways, just also to clarify, these are 5 pathways, but I'm just going to highlight a few examples of what Southeast Atlantic states or other actors in the region can do, because I don't have enough time to go through everything. So on the collection and sharing of data, Southeast Atlantic states can address practical challenges such as language barriers, internet connection, and data confidentiality. We heard that these are one of the challenges that are happening mostly in terms of the collection and sharing of data. Another suggestion is to involve local communities. We've heard of the example of the Environmental Justice Foundation that is training local communities to report on IUU fishing. That could be a way to enhance data collection, also involve local communities and create awareness of the importance of monitoring, control, and surveillance. And the second pathway is cooperation and coordination. So there's a lot of joint regional surveillance already taking place in the region. And what is interesting to note is that the African Union, in its 2050 Integrated Maritime Strategy, has indicated that it wants to enhance and have more Navy and Coast Guard networks around the African continents. And one of the options that it's interested in as well is to implement a cross-border hot pursuit function. So it sounds kind of technical, but this would mean that if an offended state identifies a vessel that is suspected of illegal fishing activities, that this state or people who work for the state, they can go to an exclusive economic zone of another state and catch this vessel. So this is a very interesting development that at such a high level, there is support for that. We've also seen that the members of the Sub-Regional Fisheries Commission have drafted an MCS convention and additional protocols. This would establish a vessel register, an observer program, and information exchange. But however, so far, this has not been adopted. So this is really a concrete thing, a concrete measure through which we can strengthen MCS in the region. Then there are also various operational level task forces, such as the West Africa Task Force that Godfrey will talk about later today, that offer a more flexible and cost-effective structure compared to formal intergovernmental mechanisms. There's this very interesting report that has been published by Stop Illegal Fishing, among others, on the importance or the role of task forces also in strengthening monitoring, control, and surveillance. So I would suggest you to have a look at that, because they provide some interesting avenues also to address MCS in a cost-effective way. Then the third avenue is through harmonization of legislation and deterrent sanctions. So in general, I think Dee has very well explained it regarding sanctions, that it's better to increase the sanctions and fines to deter illegal activities. Another suggestion would be to make access to national waters for foreign fishing vessels conditional upon sufficient MCS capacity. Because then we could really make sure, or the states that allow foreign fishing vessels to fish in their waters, that they are capable of really monitoring their activities. Another option is to enhance ownership requirements. This comes down to what Dia was talking about as well. So distant water fishing companies also play a role in strengthening monitoring, control, surveillance, or they actually could contribute to the problem as well in certain situations. Because many distant water fishing companies, they own or manage a fleet that is flagged to a Southeast Atlantic state. So what Southeast Atlantic states could do is they could enhance ownership requirements to really clarify which company is behind this vessel or this vessel activity. And in that way, also have more transparency and to see where the problem lies and to see who's responsible for potential illegal activities. Then on capacity building, we've seen that certain states, in the report we have provided some highlights and recent best practices on what's at a state level also governments have done on MCS to strengthen MCS in the region. And we see that there are departments that are dedicated to monitoring, control, and surveillance, but for example, they don't have a dedicated budget for MCS activities. So this is also one of the key measures to implement. Then also on capacity building, so just like the SRFC Monitoring, Control, and Surveillance Convention, we see also that there are efforts in other sub-regions, such as the Regional Fisheries Commission for the Gulf of Guinea and the Southern African Development Community, to adopt a regional MCS center or to provide or to have more regional MCS measures, but these have not been adopted yet or not been operationalized yet. So this again is a very practical way to strengthen MCS in the region. And I think it would be interesting to discuss perhaps later as well what is missing, why these MCS centers have not been developed yet. Then lastly, we also think that Southeast Atlantic states can contribute or play a role in global and regional processes. So, for example, they can reassess fisheries partnership agreements that they have, for example, with the European Union or with China. There's a lot of fisheries partnership agreements. And for example, with the EU, there's always a section on monitoring, control, and surveillance. Perhaps this is something that can be improved as well and strengthened. And then, second of all, if Southeast Atlantic states can at a sub-regional or regional level, they can work together, and this could allow them to speak with a unified and stronger voice in different contexts, such as at the WTO regarding fishery subsidies, or at the new High Seas Biodiversity Treaty that's being negotiated at the UN, or regarding the Port State Measures Agreements, which states in the region are currently trying to implement. So this is just a very quick overview, but I would invite you to have a look at the table that we created that provides a good summary as well of more recommendations that we give. Then just to give some concluding remarks, what we've noticed in our research is that most projects in the region that you've seen, there's so many projects, but they focus on one specific part of the Southeast Atlantic, but not the entire Abidjan Convention area that we study. So we've divided this as well in the report. We've divided the 22 states in 4 different regions, and you see really the differences that some subregions are stronger in using MCS measures than others. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned amongst the subregions that we could have a look at. Then also to say that most MCS projects, they focus on IU fishing, especially this domestic versus foreign fleets measure. But as we said in the beginning, or as I mentioned in the beginning, MCS can be used much broader beyond fishing as well. So our suggestion would be to take a more cross-sectoral approach. Then there's also something written in the report on the strategic role of ports. Port State Measures Agreement, we often in the context of MCS talk about the lack of capacity or the lack of political will of flag states to really engage in MCS activities. So we've had a look at what the role of ports can be to strengthen MCS in the region. We also see that as part of the African Union's efforts to reform fisheries policy, there's an increasing interest in governance, transparency, and MCS. And what I think is important to emphasize as well is that international funders, they often focus on technical means, but do not always address the governance perspective. So you see on the one hand, that you have funders that are working on perhaps providing satellite technology or providing capacity building, and there are increasing efforts at the African Union level to also look at governance, transparency, perhaps also the sanctioning system, or this, for example, this measure of hot pursuit. And lastly, I would like to conclude that we see that there are not many human activities happening in areas beyond national jurisdiction in the region. Most projects focus on exclusive economic zones. And I think this is really a gap because as we see as part of the negotiations of the High Seas Biodiversity Treaty, there will be new activities happening in areas beyond national jurisdiction. It's likely that they will increase. So it is timely to also think about how can we really monitor, control, and surveillance human activities in areas beyond national jurisdiction in this region. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have and to share the report with you.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for your remarks and also for the clear and concrete proposals that you suggested and that we will continue to explore with our experts. And I would like to start with Sandy. Sandy, you are a founding member of the NGO Stop Illegal Fishing, and you have a lot of experience in fisheries management in Western Africa and in Africa in general. I would first like to return with you to the COVID-19 crisis. We know that has impacted many sectors, including fisheries, of course, and we know that this crisis has led to a reduction in fisheries surveillance operations, including in Africa. And so is the situation now back to normal, or are the impact of the crisis still being felt at the moment?
Thank you, Julian, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to be here. Yeah, COVID-19, that's, it's really changed everything. I actually just got back today to Africa after 2 years of not leaving the continent. I've just been up to Europe, and that's the first time in 2 years. And the travel restrictions and the complexity of moving is still really very much with us. And I was thinking quite a lot, is this really our new norm now, even when you're vaccinated, that you need your PCR tests and everybody's still wearing masks everywhere on the planes? So I think that, yeah, in answer to your question, we are getting used to COVID. We're much more understanding it in the fisheries sector. We have systems in place to enable sort of work shifts and protective clothing. And now we're getting the vaccination. It's not so high in Africa. I know in Botswana, where I live, we're about 30%, and that's quite high for Africa. So while we're getting used to it and the restrictions are reducing, definitely in West Africa, we're still seeing, and the whole world, people are still very scared. It's very real. There's sickness keeping people away from work. There's people are off of work. You can't work in tight spaces. There's a resistance to, as Claudia just mentioned, this need for interagency meetings. So I think that we're a long way. In fact, I don't think we're going to see the old normal back again. And certainly in fisheries, I would say ports are very tricky. Going on to vessels where it's closed spaces. We all know artisanal landing spaces are really very hectic places. So people are quite scared, and we're still seeing a lot of limitations there. So I would say that the two challenges we've still got are this operational challenge of moving around and being able to get into particularly tight spaces and dealing with less people at work because of restrictions. But we're also very much seeing it in relation to cooperation between agencies nationally. I'm sure many of you are finding that you can't go and have interagency meetings so easily. We're seeing it regionally. I mean, these Zoom calls, how many conference calls? We did Kofi, we did the UN on a massive call. And this is really affecting progress in MCS and collaboration. So I think, Julian, no, we're definitely still struggling, but the answer is we're all having to work smarter. So quite a lot of the tools that were mentioned earlier, we have the remote sensing tools, but we also have the ability to share information through task forces, like the West Africa Task Force. We have the information sharing that Godfrey will speak about. So I think the way forward is just to think about how to use what we can do better. And there is one tool that we've been working with in Ghana, in West Africa, which is the use of body-worn cameras. And that's quite exciting because it's like the police, it's like you see on the TV cop programs. You wear a camera on your chest and other people can be remotely watching the inspection. So you can send one inspector or possibly two onto a vessel, and they have communication with their superiors or other colleagues, and people can see the inspection. So this is a really great tool for bringing either more fisheries colleagues or other agencies into an inspection. So we only started using that because of COVID. So opportunities have arisen. But yeah, we just got to get used to this new norm, I think. It's the way. Thank you for the update. So Stop Illegal Fishing has been is very instrumental in developing an initiative to fight illegal fishing in Africa in general. Could you please tell us more about your organization and how you work to strengthen MCS in Africa? Yeah, our organization is a network. It's a network around Africa of people who basically are connecting up people that are doing other things. So a lot of people that are cooperating with Stop Illegal Fishing have other jobs in the fisheries sector or in NGOs, in government, in intergovernmentals. And it's very much a network for sharing information and supporting initiatives that need on-the-ground African presence. So it's very active in a lot of countries and has that connection that can connect often like technology or policy processes that are happening somewhere else and ground truthing them in Africa, getting those connections. Earlier we spoke about like AIS and VMS, and if you've only got AIS, using that alone, you won't be able to know whether what you're seeing is legal or illegal unless you have a connection directly with the fisheries officers who know whether the vessels have been licensed or not. So we work a lot, for example, in West Africa with FCWC, then in East Africa with the SADC and the regional centre there.
Thank you. So I understand that you mainly work at the regional or sub-regional level. Could you please tell us why you are taking this approach, this regional or sub-regional approach, rather than working solely at the national level? What's the added value of this collaborative efforts?
Yeah, I think it's well, it very much builds on what the earlier speakers have said, that fisheries is just incredibly complicated around the whole African coastline. I really like some of the statistics that Delia brought up at the beginning, and we see this too. You can't really separate them, the industrial and the small scale. You have small scale vessels passing fish on to industrial vessels for fish meal processing. You have industrial vessels passing fish to the small scale vessels to be sold, either the bycatch or perhaps the main catch. We have a multitude of gears. We have large vessels like the reefer vessels that are working with transporting the fish then from at-sea transshipment into different ports. And all of these things are linked up. And if you work only from the perspective of one state, whether that's the coastal state or the port state or the flag state, if you only look at it from your perspective, you only see a very small part of the picture. And we see very much that this need to particularly link the different roles of states, like the port states with the flag states, with the coastal states, and sharing the information here. That has been the way that many of the cases we've worked with, when many of the illegal cases we've worked with, we actually start to get some answers and some understanding. And it is only by connecting up this information. When countries work together, it's like they have a superpower. They really do. It's their superpower to actually turn the situation so that it's not other people's agendas being pushed. It's not the foreign distant water vessels. It's not the foreign consumers it's not this outside force of deciding what's important. When the countries work together, the ability to drive the agenda related to the African needs. And a really good example of this that we see is in respect to the legislation in the fisheries. I mean, we have some very well-regulated fisheries, and these are generally linked to industrial vessels. But more than that, it's the fish that is being exported to the developed world consumer. It's usually caught by foreign flagged vessels, and it's essentially the export fish. And because of the demands we have through RFMOs, through a very developed legal framework, we pull our MCS capacity in the region to focus on those fisheries. So in this region we're talking about, it would be the tuna very much, because there's a lot of traceability requirements in order to sell it. Whereas compared to what we spoke about earlier with those amazing figures on the small pelagic, and the small pelagic species are feeding Africa. FW countries, that's the 6 countries from Nigeria through to Liberia, they import 24 times more by volume fish than they export. Yet the focus of MCS will be mainly on the high value export species, which is rather scary when you consider how important the small scale and the lower value species are. But in general, our African consumers they're not so discerning. They're more worried about value for money and good protein for a low budget than they're worried about the traceability side. And that's something I want you to mention, because that makes the focus when MCS focuses on the illegal. You have to have a legislative framework in place for it to be illegal. But actually, from the African perspective, monitoring the unregulated is really important for sustainability. So I do feel that, sorry if I went a bit off track there, but I do feel, Julian, that this superpower, when the states get together, that they can ask the right questions and look at what's important to the West Africa region is really important. Yeah, so that's why we support it. It's music to our ears. We love to see regional cooperation and climate change, subsidies, all of the big issues that are really impacting on our small scale fisheries, our industrial fisheries. We need to unite and think about what's important. We've got the Africa 2063 agenda. We need to think about our agendas. So yeah, regional cooperation.
Thank you very much, Sandy. I would like now to give the floor to Godfrey Baidu-Tsibou. So Godfrey, you work at the Fisheries Committee for the West Central Gulf of Guinea that was created in 2006. Good afternoon, Godfrey.
Hi, good afternoon, Julian.
This fisheries, your organization recently launched a regional MCS center, which is developing MCS measures at the regional level. So could you please tell us a bit more about this initiatives and about this center, MCS center?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this discussion. It's afternoon here. Somebody was in the morning somewhere, but we are fine. Currently, we are in Abidjan having a regional discussion under the West Africa Task Force. Yeah, so the FCWC Fisheries Committee for West Central Gulf of Guinea has established a regional MCS center in Tema, Ghana. And already Dia talked about the issues of West Africa. And it is based on these issues that the FCWC has been set up. So the initiative to establish the center is in line with the objectives and purposes of the committee, FCWC. FCWC's mission is to promote cooperation among member states and to ensure through appropriate management, the conservation and optimum utilization of living marine resources in marine waters under jurisdiction of the member states, and encouraging sustainable development of fisheries based on such resources. So the Conference of Ministers, which is within the structure of the FCWC, gave endorsement to the establishment of the center in 2019. And fortunately, under PESCAO, we got funds to set it up. The PESCAO project covers both the FCWC and then the sub-regional fisheries commission that is our sister fisheries body. The center is equipped with VMS and AIS, so the two are integrated. But the purpose of the center is to be able to have the member states to share their national VMS with us. It has come up that when you depend only on AIS, you have just part of the picture. So because VMS comes from the member states themselves, the purpose is that we will have the national VMS shared with the center, so that now we have more reliable, tracking information of the vessels, both national and foreign vessels that have been authorized to fish in the FCWC zone. So what is the center supposed to do? It is to support vessel monitoring. It has come up in the earlier discussion that the region hasn't got the capacity to do that. So with the center establishing a VMS center, we are giving the member states a window to be able to monitor their own vessels in their waters. So that window, whether they have a fisheries monitoring center themselves or whether their systems are working in their countries, this window, will enable them to be able to monitor their systems, their vessels. The center is also going to serve the purpose of a regional record of authorized fishing vessels. The vessels that are in the region come and go, but there's no record of them. So there is a need for this center to be able to build a database of the vessels that are, in the region authorized to fish, so that we have this database to depend on, so that those that are committing IU infractions can easily, be exempted, from fishing in the region. Also, the center is to support regional and joint at-sea patrols. Currently, we are planning our first, joint patrol between Togo and Benin. Many times when these things happen, they come from outside, but there's a need for us, to use, the information we have in the center to support, joint patrols, by the member states. So as we are going to have this one, the center is going to provide pre-operational intelligence information to those who are at sea conducting, the patrols. Also, the center will support a regional observer program, such that foreign vessels that want to fish in any member state should have a regional observer, on board, so that they'll be able to provide first-hand scientific and compliance information, that will enable us to determine whether the vessels, complied with, national legislation or not. And then finally, training and capacity building. The center, will serve, to provide a capacity building in MCS, especially VMS and AIS, analysis, such that we'll be able to use the system widely, not only at the center, but by all the member states, because we have also provided them with equipment that will enable them to be able to use, the center, as a window. So not that we have provided them with this equipment for them to be able to do that. And then through that, we'll build, their capacity to be able to do what is expected of them as MCS officers. The benefits as follows, improving knowledge, information and knowledge, improving information and knowledge. Vessels come and go, but we do not understand them. We do not know them. But with the center and with the database I talked about, we'll be able to have good information about these vessels, that come and go and what their behavior are, so that we'll be able to understand them better. With this, we'll be able to increase oversight of all the MCS activities in the region. And then through what we do here, we will be enhancing cooperation, communication, and collaboration, which Sandy talked about. It serves the countries, in a way that, like she put it, as a superpower. I mean, they are not acting alone. If there is a decision to take, I mean, they are not acting alone. They are acting as a group. They are acting together to deal with the issues, that affect us as far as IUU is concerned. And most importantly, to create transparency and accountability. Most of the things that are happening are not known because the way they are done, information is not known. All that is that vessels are, plying our waters. So with the gathering of data, with the vessel tracking and analysis, we'll be, opening up the system up. So we'll create transparency and then also accountability, which the region needs, to be able to protect, the fisheries resources that we have. So these are the things that the Regional MCS Center, has been set up to do.
Thank you very much. So we see that this center is definitely a good news for the region, for the cooperation around the MCS issues. Do you have any example of recent national or regional success in strengthening monitoring, control, and surveillance in the region? Something that you would like to share with us, a recent success story?
Yeah. Yes, I was talking about joint patrols. Since the launch of the center in May, the center has been supporting joint patrol operations. What I talked about initially was about what the FCWC itself will be doing, but then we have UNODC supporting Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, to conduct joint operations. And the center, because it's available and it has information, we provided, information to the operation in terms of intelligence to be able to carry out the activities. Ghana on its own has also done some joint patrol recently, and the center, was used, to provide information to them. What we are also doing is about developing the necessary documents, National Plan of Action, and also fisheries legislation, helping the member states to be able to review and then also to have these documents that will help them to be able to implement MCS in the region. The center is also developing standard operating procedures. So far, we have done about 8 standard operating procedures, which are being reviewed by the member states, so that that can be used not only at the center, but also by the member states in the fisheries monitoring centers. Currently, we are also working with Global Fishing Watch and then TMT, and through that, we have what we call the Vessel Viewer app. The Vessel Viewer app, that will support port state measures implementation in the ports. What is happening is that, yes, we have port state measures through which decisions about whether vessels have to be allowed in port or not have to be taken. but then based upon what information? So through this collaboration with these partners, we have the Vessel Viewer app, which provides adequate information, historical information about fishing vessels which want to come into our ports, so that inspectors can take, decisions very quickly about these vessels within the period, the advanced period of 48 hours or 72 hours. We also have been conducting trainings in VMS and AIS monitoring, introduction to maritime domain awareness, verification of documents and information provided in fisheries law enforcement, training on inspector language cards, and then, as I've indicated, the use of the viewer, Vessel Viewer app. Importantly, we are sharing a lot of information between the member states. A lot of information is being shared, which goes to support enforcement actions like inspections at sea and then inspection in the port. And then also support prosecution of fisheries infraction in the region. Finally, I can talk about what the FAO is also doing with us. ECOWAS, FCWC, and then SRFC, such that these organizations will coordinate their efforts at fighting IUU, how we can bring ourselves together so that we can fight IUU on a bigger front than we are doing as individual regional fisheries bodies. So these are some of the achievements or some of the activities that we've been able to undertake.
Thank you very much, Godfrey, and congratulations for this extensive activities. I would like to give the floor again to Dia. Dia, please come back. Dia, we know that there are several initiatives that have been launched recently to promote the transparency of fisheries activity, and the most famous one being certainly Global Fishing Watch. So what is your assessment of this Global Fishing Watch and other technological tools for transparency? Do you think that they effectively contribute to fights against illegal activities at sea? What is your opinion?
I think it's part of the solution. Obviously, technology is not going to solve it all. Technology has to be embedded within human efforts and human understanding. Global Fishing Watch, other initiatives such as Sea Vision, Skylight, and others contribute to increasing drastically maritime domain awareness, which is something that is absolutely needed to limit, for example, blind patrolling. Is it the only solution? Like, is it going to solve the problem? Probably not, but when it's integrated with human intelligence, human capacity, it is going to be a massive part of the solution, absolutely.
And you yourself, I know that you contributed to the launch of the Spyglass platform, which is also a tool to bring transparency in fight against illegal fishing. Could you please tell us more about these initiatives and how it's being used by the different stakeholders?
Absolutely. Yes, I did found Spyglass. So Spyglass was really informed by some of the issues that Godfrey has spoken about, and a deep frustration about not seeing information being shared between states in West Africa. That's how it started. We brought in people from 7 countries of West Africa to UBC. At the time, I was at the University of British Columbia, and we decided to write a paper, which was the Doumbouya et al. 2017 paper about illegal fishing in the region. And everybody has been able, once we were in that same room, everybody has been able to get information very easily on the vessels that have been sanctioned, caught and sanctioned within the waters of these 7 countries. We ended up creating a database of 300 vessels in less than 15 days, basically. And from there, I was like, okay, maybe this should be something that is more global, because vessels tend to be global. Industrial vessels tend to go from one region to another in the space of a fishing trip. So many of the vessels that operate in the region have a criminal record. As I said, like a third of those vessels that are authorized do happen to have a criminal record. So informing, the database really exists to inform previous criminal or illegal practices beyond the combined list of IUU vessels. So there's a massive difference between Spyglass and the combined list of IUU vessels. The combined list of IUU vessels only includes vessels that have been blacklisted or notified by RFMOs, Regional Fisheries Management Organizations. Spyglass includes those, plus any other vessel that has been caught fishing legally, any fishing vessel that has done something wrong or an offense. And it includes today it includes around 8,000 vessels and 2,000 companies. I mean, the Spyglass platform. In terms of how it's being used, it's really about understanding, as Godfrey has mentioned as well, it's really about understanding what fishing vessels have been up to. When you receive at port a vessel that has done something wrong in the past, it's more suspicious and hence it should be more likely to be inspected more thoroughly. It's the same thing when it comes to monitoring at sea. Vessels that have no criminal record will have less risk associated with them than vessels that have previously fished illegally or have done something wrong illegally. But that's only applicable to the industrial sector.
Thank you very much, Dia. Merci à tous les quatre pour vos observations et pour avoir lancé le débat. Il nous reste 25 minutes pour prendre un certain nombre de questions qui ont déjà été formulées dans le chat. I invite Godfrey, Sandy, Claudia, and Dia to switch their camera on so that we can reply to the questions that have been asked in the chat. The first question is not really a question, but an observation that I would like to share with you. Somebody says that beyond MCS, you need capacity building on strengthening legal processes, following on from identifying IUU fishing or other illegal practices. MCS is expensive, but when the legal process does not follow through, it's particularly sad and even demoralizing. Can you please share your experience vis-a-vis these disconnections between the high technology and the different tools that can be used and the governance issues and the legal processes that sometimes does not follow? I don't know who wants to start to reply. Godfrey, Sandy, Dia, Claudia.
I can jump in.
Sure.
I cannot stop thinking about that case in Ghana of the I would like to say disappeared observer, but really murdered observer. After the vessel was caught, it really demoralized the troop that the legal finish hasn't been following through. So when we're talking about the human side or the legislative side, we're really talking about the legal finish, the ability once you catch a vessel to fine or sanction the vessel accordingly. We see examples we saw the example in Ghana of that vessel, I forgot the name of the vessel, that came back a year later after not being sanctioned previously. It did exactly the same thing. It fished illegally the same way, and it claimed it could not. The captain or the local owner claimed that they couldn't afford to pay the fine. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about legal finish. We see the same cases in Sierra Leone, where if you look at the lists of vessels that have been sanctioned, you'll see certain vessels being sanctioned drastically more than others for the same offense. And that's also demoralizing because at the end of the day, you work hard at sea to catch vessels or at port to catch vessels. You're thinking that you're going to give an example. By giving an example, it contributes to economic deterrence of the crime. But when it doesn't work that way, it not only demoralizes the troop, but it perpetuates the crime on itself.
Sandy, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I can just add something. Thank you. I think that's where it could be interesting where, yes, those cases unfortunately are happening an awful lot. And there's several ways that can be tackled. Very operationally, inspectors can be taught and trained more in actually evidence collecting so that at least the cases are more robust when they get to the jurisdiction, to the judiciary. I also think that when that happens, that's when publicity and awareness and sharing the information, even if a case wasn't successfully punished and penalized, And that's within a regional group like Godfrey was talking about. Godfrey, you know that in West Africa Task Force, or now the MCS Centre, then that vessel becomes a high-risk vessel. And basically it can be made more difficult for it to operate. More inspections, more checks in ports, more due diligence before licensing. It's not the perfect answer, but it can actually help a little bit, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what we need more is commitment from governments. We hear about the importance of fisheries in every speech, that fisheries is important, so many people benefit, it's of nutritional importance. But then how is a resource being protected by government? You find, as we have heard, that MCS is not funded. MCS is not funded. MCS hasn't got staff. MCS hasn't got equipment. And you find also that there aren't adequate legislation, to back whatever the MCS, has to do. Yeah, so there is a lot of commitment that is required, from governments. We are working with 6 member states, and that is something that we are always, driving home. There's a need for more commitment, because if the fisheries is not regulated, the benefits will always be lost. So there is the need, for a lot of commitment from government to ensure that MCS is, strengthened as against what we always hear, that MCS is weak. Is weak because the systems are weak. So that is what I would add to it. There are a lot of cases that are, that had gone cold, all because they are not being followed. Nobody's asking questions, and day to day, you find the same vessels or new vessels being, granted licenses, to fish. So there is a need. There is a need for a lot of commitment from government. And it is as we work together, as we share information, as we collaborate, that, we'll be able to raise transparency to a very high level, so that some of these things, cannot go undercover. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Godfrey. Thank you very much. Claudia, you want to add something on this issue?
Yeah, just very briefly, because I answered to this question in the chat already, and I think it's a very good question. It also, maybe to add to this, that the West Africa Task Force, they are a good example because they provide capacity building from the point where intelligence about infringements to fisheries rules is received to the enforcement and prosecution of perpetrators. And what's very important to keep in mind as well is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to MCS, and that you need different tools depending on what kind of rules we're looking at, what kind of situation are we dealing with, and courts and the whole legal supply chain. They also need to be informed what kind of evidence we need, basically, to really prove that illegal fishing activities or other illegal activities have been taking place.
Thank you. So you all mentioned the need for government commitment, and at the same time in the chat somebody says that but often in Africa, such working together gets dominated by state actors from the national level, and a neglection of the sub-national stakeholders. And he or she, I don't know, mentioned the fact that we need this multi-level approach, and not only from the government. Do you also, maybe Godfrey, the question is for you, work with subnational governments, and I mean not only the supra-state authorities, but also local authorities?
Yeah, we work with them. As I said, we are in a meeting today, and we are looking at what the member states are doing. In 2 weeks' time, we are going to have a meeting with the ministers to discuss issues that have happened over the past year. So we are at the regional level, but I mean, the purpose is to bring the member states which form, the organization together, to solve a common problem, that is running through the sub-region. So yes, we deal with them, but then we don't have the authority, to take actions at that level. That is it. We will continue to provide the necessary advice, the necessary support technically and financially, if it is within our means, so that they'll be able to do what they have, put down in their legislations and their policies, to do.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. On this regional cooperation, there are some questions in the chat about, I mean, everybody recognizes the added value of the regional cooperations. And the question is about the countries that champions MCS in Western Africa. Are there some specific country pushing the others to do better? I mean, for the regional cooperation to work, we always need this kind of champion states pushing for the process. Could you please tell us who they are? Somebody, I don't know, Godfrey.
Yeah, we wish we had countries that are seriously championing MCS. Not too long ago, Ghana was doing very, very well, but the efforts, have declined. So I wouldn't be able to stick my neck for any particular country. They are at various levels, but that is why we are there, bringing them together so that we make them see the total picture, not the picture that belongs to the member states, but they see the total picture, and then we urge them to use, the available tools, legislations, international agreements, to be able to solve these problems. But we wish that we'll have, champions, within the region to be able to draw the others, up.
Yeah, I can just say, but yeah, Godfrey, I saw that question and I was thinking to myself too. And I think it varies through time. Obviously, if you have a good, when you have a good minister responsible for fisheries, that can make a massive positive impact.
Yeah.
We've seen that, Godfrey. I've seen it in also in Southern and Eastern Africa.
Yeah.
A good political force can really lift up the morale and the ability for inspectors and fisheries officers to take action. But I do think that champions, just because you don't have a political champion, you can have very strong champions at other levels, heads of operation, perhaps inspectors in specific ports or in the communities as well. We've seen some fantastic championship of community monitoring programs, a little bit linked to the last question about involvement of the non-state actors. And that actually can put pressure up through the system or through the different layers of the system. It's not always that if you don't have a good political champion that you can't have champions elsewhere. And the other thing I thought about was that I've seen, and I don't know, Godfrey, if you would agree, but when we have new legislation, whether it's a new act or new regulations or new decree, that's not a person, but that's a championship legislation that will often be more modern, will incorporate the latest thinking, perhaps of bringing in labour, connections to ILO and IMO, and that tends to pick up the operational people as well. That they're sort of become a champion on the sort of forefront of the better legislation to support the international thinking. That's a little bit different, but I was thinking about that with champions.
And as I indicated, we are also supporting the member states to address the gaps in the legislation. those that don't have the, how do you call it, plan of action to combat IUU, we are supporting them to do it. And as we go through, the processes, it opens the, general understanding. The point about non-state actors is also very important. I think Claudia's presentation showed that there are a lot of non-state actors in the region, and we wish that whatever they are doing will catch up as quickly as possible. There is a lot that has to be done to be able to deal with the political non-commitment or the lack of commitment on the part of the political players.
I'm just thinking there, Godfrey, we can have political journalist champions too. They're extremely important in some of the countries. The journals, the awareness campaigns can be really exemplary, and that can help. And so I think champions can come in across the board, all levels and all players.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Dia, do you want to add on that?
I think that there is, I really appreciate the interventions of Sandy and Godfrey on that. And I just would like to add a cautionary tale there with regards to environmental defender retaliation as well. We've seen community champions. I've seen community champions in Senegal that have been criminalized, for example. And that's something that unfortunately is very risky for people. Like when we're talking about reporters, we've seen some issues in Ghana. Like I have been engaged with reporters in Ghana that have seen their children threatened, and receiving threats and everything. So one has to be really cautious about empowering such endeavors. It has to come with, the ability to control the risk as well.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Another question from the chat. Do you consider that the control and monitoring of EU member states on their external fishing fleets in Western African waters is sufficient and compliant with the international rules on MCS? Don't know, I think Dia, you did a research paper on it, so please. You're muted, Dia.
Sorry, absolutely. So we did the research paper on monitoring control and surveillance where we compared the different levels of monitoring control and surveillance in the sub-region, the countries of the sub-regional commission. So it's not the FCWC quite, but it's something that is actually, I would say that the efforts kind of get infused and then increase at the FCWC level. There is more regional cooperation at the FCWC level than the sub-regional fisheries commissions level. Unfortunately, we see some change there. In terms of tools, at the moment, if we talk about a holistic picture of tools, of MCS tools, and we've all talked about this, looking into what exists on land that allows for legal finish versus what exists at sea that allows the collection of information. It has to be all together. What we've seen and what we've interpreted through that paper is that when one is lacking the ability to conduct such operations is going to be on its own is going to be reflected. So, for example, if you have MCS that is quite strong at sea, but without a proper legal finish, at the end of the day, illegal fishing is going to increase regardless because it's not a deterrent. Heavy MCS at sea isn't a deterrent on its own. When you have heavy sanctions, but not the ability to actually catch the vessels, it's not going to work either. That's a given. So in the region, we see often that one or the other is lacking. We're not there yet. Even if the regulations are quite strong, there is a mechanism that connects the two that is also lacking. And that's what we found in that research.
Yeah.
Godfrey?
Yeah, I think what we are doing, especially under the West Africa Task Force, under the West Africa Task Force is to get the member states to share the licenses of vessels they have authorized. That includes the EU vessels and all kinds of vessels. What we have realized is that at a point in time, the member states feel that they should not share the information with us. There is that, they claim they have to protect the information and all kinds of things. But without that, even if we are tracking the vessel, we don't know whether that vessel has been licensed or not. So that information is very important. And like Dia has said, we need a holistic, approach. If one thing is working and the other is not working, it gives room to the IUU operators to have, their way. So for us, the system that we have established, if we're able to implement the licenses, the authorizations, the database, the tracking and information sharing, I think that will go a long way to be able to deal with any distant water fleet in the FCWC zone.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that very quickly?
Sure.
I think we tend to put the burden a lot on West African states with regards to sharing licenses, but we need to put a burden on the distant water fishing states, the flag states as well, to share that kind of information. So it took years for the EU to begin sharing their license lists in a database. Now you can extract it basically every week, but it's something that we have to highlight. The burden doesn't have to be on the coastal states only.
Alone. Okay.
We have three minutes left, so one last question from the chat, and which is very interesting to conclude. What kind of global commitments or initiatives could be announced at the international level to step up MCS programs and efforts? A wish of a new international initiative, or I don't know, what would you need in 1 minute each? Claudia, maybe on the ICES, because we know that the ICES treaty is going to hopefully be concluded next year. So there's probably a link with these MCS issues.
Yes, indeed. And we've written a report also on how to strengthen monitoring, control, and surveillance in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So this report is not on the region specifically, but we've had a look at the treaty text of the new High Seas Biodiversity Treaty that's currently being negotiated. Well, it's clear we're not going to have a global police force that will be created during the treaty process, but there's still some general principles that we could include, for example, to strengthen MCS on transparency and cooperation and coordination. And one of our key recommendations would be on marine protected areas, which we didn't discuss today, but we think it would be good if states would assess before coming up with marine protected areas, whether they really have the capacity to conduct monitoring, control, and surveillance activities, especially in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So this is like one of the ways which MCS can be strengthened. And we're in the process of also developing a global MCS conference. So just putting it out here, using this opportunity to announce that. So in case anyone has any great ideas, then we're happy to hear about this.
Thank you, Claudia. Sandy, last word, last wish.
Yeah, I think that there was more effort put to try to look at balancing MCS, so that the focus of MCS took a more holistic and ecosystem approach, not just targeting the high value export illegal activities, but also monitoring other fisheries where we need information to understand the sustainability issues and the interlinking that was said at the very beginning of this webinar about how what happens in the artisanal affects what's happening in the industrial. So I would really like to see that we don't pull all of our MCS efforts in the region towards the species that are important for the Western world, the developed consumer. We focus more on the fish that we need in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Godfrey, a few words of conclusion.
Yes. So I think finally, I may want to talk about supporting Port State Measures Agreement implementation in the West Africa region. It is not that easy. It looks simple, but it is not that easy to say a vessel should not come to port. I mean, it's not that easy. There is a need for information. So as I indicated, we are working with TMT, Global Fishing Watch, to be able to have a very simple tool for inspectors to take those decisions. And then we're also supporting risk assessment. So there is a need for, port risk assessment, to be done in such a way that, one knows what you are dealing with at any point in time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Godfrey.
Right.
Dia, the final word is for you.
I echo every one speaker there, and I would just like to add that ultimately surveillance has to be decolonized, monitoring, management, all these issues have, or solutions have to be decolonized. What we see is that the sustainability of such efforts is often questioned because it comes and goes with funding, with international work and all of that. So developing solutions that are proper to the regions, to not only talking about West Africa, but wherever we go, actually, when we're talking about marine protected areas, beyond the ability to monitor, is that marine protected area actually appropriate within the cultural landscape that it's going to be implemented in? How our community is going to respond to that? What is the real problem? And there is, I think that when we talk about solution, we have to talk about the solutions to the viruses as opposed to solutions to the symptoms. So when we're seeing a lot of illegal fishing by industrial fleets, maybe they are just a little bit overcapitalized through subsidies. And one of the solutions is to remove those subsidies to the industrial sector. So I would say, so addressing not the symptom, but addressing the core issue on itself.
Thanks so much, Dia, Godfrey, Sandy and Claudia. It's time now to close this webinar. Merci à tous de nous avoir suivis. Merci également aux traducteurs. Donc, vous l'avez vu, la surveillance de l'océan, c'est un enjeu majeur pour assurer la gestion durable des ressources de l'océan. Et l'IDDRI continuera évidemment à travailler sur ce sujet et à mobiliser autour de ces questions. Je vous dis donc à très bientôt. Merci encore.